Superman has protected Earth for years. What no one knows, not even him, is that someone has spent the entire time watching, calculating, and building a plan to hand this planet to an empire that has never lost. Nolan Grayson has memorized the continents. He's studied the militaries. He's identified every defender and calculated exactly how long it will take to neutralize each one. Then he watches Superman spend an afternoon helping children cross a street in Metropolis, and the Viltrumite Empire's entire plan for Earth just stopped working. He isn't the strongest thing on the planet, not even close. This is that timeline. Here's what you need to know. The Viltrumite Empire expands across the galaxy on a simple premise: power equals authority. They send a single operative to a target planet, give them decades to weaken the local defenses, and then the Empire arrives to finish the job. Nolan Grayson is that operative. He integrates into human society perfectly. He meets Debbie, gets married, becomes Omni-Man, and waits for his son Mark to develop his powers before executing Earth's primary defenders. That's the normal timeline, but this one has a variable that Nolan didn't plan for. Decades before Nolan ever arrives, a small silver spaceship crashes in a cornfield in Smallville, Kansas. Jonathan and Martha Kent recover the infant inside before the government detects the anomaly. They name the boy Clark and raise him with standard human moral values: empathy, patience, the importance of helping neighbors. Clark's alien biology reacts to Earth's yellow sun as he grows up. His cells act as living solar batteries, granting him strength, flight, heat vision, and freeze breath. He doesn't master these abilities instantly. He breaks doors on accident. He crashes into barns while learning to fly. He learns through trial and error, guided by the patient love of his adoptive parents. By the time Nolan arrives on Earth, Clark Kent already operates in Metropolis as Superman. He's young, he's a bit awkward, he makes mistakes and smiles a lot. He views himself as a friend to humanity rather than a flawless legend. But Nolan views him as a problem. Nolan observes Superman from a distance for months. His Viltrumite programming is straightforward: the strong dominate the weak. He watches a being with enough power to crack the planet's crust, spend his time rescuing stranded motorists, and floating down the sidewalk to ask people if they're having a good day. Nolan finds this behavior illogical. He also thinks it's inconvenient. He calculates the physical threat Superman poses and arrives at a simple conclusion: a direct confrontation with a fully charged Kryptonian carries a severe risk of failure. He can't begin preparing Earth for assimilation while that variable is active. His timeline for conquering the planet stops the moment he realizes what Clark Kent actually is. But Nolan keeps watching. He needs to understand the Kryptonian before he can neutralize him. The Global Defense Agency monitors all superhuman activity on Earth. Cecil Stedman controls the GDA on pure pragmatism. He uses heroes as assets and deploys them like chess pieces to maintain global security. He relies on Omni-Man because Nolan is efficient, precise, and willing to be brutal when the situation requires it. Superman presents a unique logistical problem. See, Cecil can't control Clark Kent. Superman refuses to sign government contracts. He refuses to operate as a military weapon for any specific nation. If Cecil orders a preemptive strike on an enemy base that might cause civilian casualties, Superman actively intervenes to stop the GDA's missiles. Cecil places Superman under constant surveillance. He assigns Donald Ferguson to track the Kryptonians' movements. Donald spends months analyzing flight patterns and civilian interactions. The GDA eventually tracks Clark's origins back to the Smallville crash site. Cecil's science division excavates the buried Kryptonian ship. While dismantling the engine core, the scientists discover glowing green rocks powering the vessel. They identified the irradiated mineral as a biological hazard specific to Kryptonian cellular structure. They classify it as kryptonite. Cecil secures the world's only supply. He locks it inside a lead-lined vault deep beneath the Pentagon. He doesn't want to kill Superman, but Cecil demands a contingency plan for every powerful being on Earth, and now he has one for Superman. Despite the constant friction, Cecil acknowledges the operational reality. Superman limits casualty rates to near zero during natural disasters. He moves fast enough to evacuate entire cities before tidal waves hit. Cecil accepts the compromise. He uses Omni-Man for offensive operations and relies on Superman for global stabilization. The only person who hadn't figured out how to use Clark Kent was Nolan. Superman doesn't officially join the Guardians of the Globe. He prefers to operate independently, away from bureaucratic restrictions and endless committee meetings. But he maintains a close relationship with the team. He attends their briefing sessions just to check in. He provides tactical input. He also brings coffee and asks about their weekend plans. He learns their real names and treats every member as a friend rather than a coworker. The Immortal respects Clark's dedication, though he finds the constant optimism slightly annoying. He lived through centuries of war. He views Clark as a naive kid who hasn't seen real hardship. Darkwing spends his nights building contingencies to neutralize Superman if he ever goes rogue. Martian Man feels a deep kinship with Clark, both of them alien exiles living amongst humans, and they frequently share stories about their respective cultures. The team operates better because of Clark's presence. They trust him completely. They feel like a family. Nolan Grayson watches this dynamic and calculates a new problem. He can't murder the Guardians of the Globe to weaken Earth's defenses the way the Empire's protocol demands. Clark patrols the globe constantly and monitors police frequencies. He would investigate. He would find what Nolan left behind. Nolan's primary mission is completely stalled, but his son Mark is getting older. The Viltrumite biology is developing, and Nolan is running out of time to solve the Kryptonian problem before everything gets more complicated. The ripple effects of Superman's presence extend into the Grayson household in a direction Nolan doesn't anticipate. Debbie Grayson operates as a successful real estate agent. She's sharp. In the standard timeline, she doesn't suspect Nolan's true nature until after the Guardians are already dead. But in this timeline, Debbie meets Clark Kent. Clark covers a charity gala in Metropolis for the Daily Planet. Debbie and Nolan attend to represent the superhero community. Clark approaches them with his notepad. Debbie finds him charming and genuine. She notices the specific way he talks to the catering staff, with the exact same respect he shows the wealthy donors at the same table. On the drive home, she compares that to Nolan. Nolan spends his evening staring out the window, brooding over his stalled mission. He treats human interactions as a tedious chore. Debbie begins noticing the subtle cracks in his facade much earlier than she would have otherwise. She realizes that her husband doesn't actually care about the people he saves. He only cares about the act of saving them. She starts asking difficult questions about Nolan's past on Viltrum long before Mark gets his powers. At this point, Mark Grayson is 17 years old. He works at a fast food restaurant. He takes out the trash, throws a bag of garbage, and realizes his Viltrumite powers have finally activated. Nolan begins training him immediately. The training focuses on the reality of their strength. Nolan punches Mark hard to teach him how to take a hit. He emphasizes that humans are fragile. Viltrumites operate on a stronger tier of existence. That's the lesson. Mark designs a suit. He adopts the name Invincible. He starts patrolling the city. During his first week, he encounters an armored villain robbing a facility. He struggles with the laser weaponry. He gets knocked through a brick wall and misjudges his strength, trying to punch through the armor, nearly breaking his own hand. He's overwhelmed. Superman lands next to him. Clark doesn't attack the villain immediately. He turns his back to the hostile target and offers Mark a hand. He asks if it's okay. The villain fires a plasma blast directly at Superman's back. It hits him and dissipates completely. Clark doesn't flinch. He turns around and uses his heat vision to melt the villain's weapons. The fight ends in 3 seconds without a single punch thrown. Superman introduces himself to Invincible. He compliments the suit. He tells Mark the first few weeks on the job are always the hardest and admits that he once crashed into a water tower during his own first patrol. He doesn't lecture Mark about combat efficiency or genetic superiority. He tells him the most important part of the job is making sure people feel safe when they see him. Mark returns home that night with a different perspective. He compares his father's increasingly cold training to Clark's. He realizes there's more than one way to be a hero. Samantha Eve Wilkins, or Adam Eve, watches Clark work. She possesses the power to manipulate matter. She can solve global crises like hunger and drought if she chooses to. In the standard timeline, she struggles with whether fighting villains is actually the best use of what she can do. She spends years trying to fit inside a traditional superhero identity that was never built for her. But in this timeline, she watches Superman consistently prioritize rescue operations over fighting. She watches him dismantle threats without inflating his own mythology. She watches him treat the act of saving someone as its own reward, not a performance. Eve leaves the teen team earlier than she would otherwise. She moves to Africa to focus on humanitarian efforts. She doesn't announce it as a dramatic sacrifice. She just goes, because Clark made the decision seem obvious. And that absence matters. She isn't in the line of fire when things escalate. She's already doing more good than the war will let her do later. Then the Flaxans invade Earth. They open interdimensional portals in a major city center. Time accelerates for them on Earth, so they deploy tanks and energy weapons quickly to secure a foothold before the troops age out. Omni-Man and Invincible are the first to arrive. Nolan instructs Mark to use lethal force, arguing the invaders won't stop until they're destroyed. Nolan tears through Flaxan tanks, killing the soldiers inside. He treats the invasion as an extermination protocol, but Superman is right behind him. He assesses a battlefield. He sees Nolan dismantling the enemy. He also sees falling debris threatening the civilians below. Clark prioritizes the rescue. He flies at supersonic speed, intercepting concrete rubble before it crushes pedestrians. He uses freeze breath to coat a building in thick ice, creating temporary structural supports to hold the concrete in place. He smiles at terrified civilians and tells them everything will be okay. Once they're clear, he addresses the Flaxan troops. He doesn't execute them. He uses heat vision to disable their targeting sensors. He uses his bare hands to crush their energy rifles. He dismantles their entire offensive capability without taking a single life. The Flaxans retreat through their portals. The rapid aging does the rest. Nolan criticizes Clark's methods immediately. He tells them leaving the enemy alive only ensures they return with better weapons. True defenses require the elimination of the threat. That's how the Empire does it, and that's how it works. Clark disagrees, politely but firmly. You built your whole empire on the idea that power earns authority, Clark tells him. But the people down there didn't give us authority because we're powerful. They gave it to us because we're here, because we showed up for them. The moment we start executing every enemy we fight, we stop being protectors. We become exactly what we're supposed to protect them from. Nolan doesn't respond. Mark stands between them. He looks at the disabled tanks, the surviving civilians, and the blood on his father's hands. He decides which argument he believes. Nolan realizes he's out of time. The Viltrumite Empire expects results. He can't proceed while Superman remains active. He can't kill the Guardians without leaving evidence that Clark will eventually trace back to him. He decides he must eliminate the Kryptonian first. Nolan uses his GDA security clearance to access Cecil's restricted files. He hacks the global database by intimidating a mid-level technician and forcing the man to bypass the firewalls. He searches for any data on Superman's physiological weaknesses. Then he finds the classified file on kryptonite. The GDA confirms the radioactive green mineral degrades Kryptonian cell tissue, negating solar absorption and causing severe physical weakness. Nolan locates the underground storage facility beneath the Pentagon. He waits until Cecil is distracted by a rogue weather machine crisis in the Pacific Ocean. He infiltrates the vault, moves faster than the security cameras can track, tears the steel door off their hinges, and grabs a containment unit of refined kryptonite. He creates a lead-lined compartment inside his uniform. He keeps a shard on him at all times, preparing for the confrontation that he knows is coming. Cecil's monitoring systems register the breach 40 minutes too late. The lead lining makes the shard invisible to every scanner in the GDA inventory. There's no way to tell where it is or who has it. Then, Nolan begins planning the location. Nolan needs to isolate Superman from populated cities to avoid collateral damage that might draw other heroes. He destroys a crucial support bridge in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado just as a fully loaded passenger train approaches a gap. Superman monitors the emergency frequencies. He hears the distress call and flies to Colorado. Clark arrives just in time. The train is derailing off the broken tracks. He catches the lead engine, straining against the immense momentum. He digs his boots into the side of the mountain and stops the train from plummeting into the gorge below. He lowers the cars onto a stable plateau, one at a time, checking each window as he goes. Every passenger is safe. Clark dusts his hands. He looks up. Nolan is already there, hovering in the air above him, watching the rescue with cold detachment. He's been watching the entire time. A moment of silence goes by. "You're always so focused on saving them," Nolan says. "You never stop to think if they're actually worth saving." Clark looks at him steadily. "They're people, Nolan. They're always worth saving. What happened to the bridge?" "I destroyed it. I needed you out here, away from the city, away from Mark." "Why would you do that?" Nolan explains his true mission. He doesn't soften it. Viltrumites don't travel the galaxy to protect weak planets. They travel to conquer them. Earth belongs to the Viltrumite Empire. The Kryptonian anomaly is the only thing standing in the way. That's the whole truth. Clark shakes his head. "I won't let you hurt these people. I don't want to fight you, Nolan, but I will stop you." Nolan doesn't hesitate. He launches himself at Clark. Clark blocks a strike with his forearm. The collision of their dense cellular structures creates a shockwave that shatters the surrounding trees and sends snow flying in every direction. Nolan attempts a combination of strikes, but Clark absorbs the hits. He doesn't rely on advanced martial arts. He relies on extreme durability and instinct. He grabs Nolan's wrist, rotates his torso, and throws the Viltrumite through a granite peak. Nolan recovers and flies back, tackling Clark into the mountainside. They brawl through the snow. Clark fights defensively, trying to grapple Nolan down, trying to talk him back. Nolan fights to kill. Realizing he can't beat Clark in a pure contest of strength, Nolan creates an opening. He hits Clark in the chest. As Clark tries to stand, Nolan reaches into his uniform. He opens the lead-lined compartment and pulls out a glowing green shard. The radiation hits Clark immediately. Clark falls to his knees. The solar energy in his cells begin to decay. His veins bulge and turn dark green. He gasps for air, feeling the weight of normal earthly gravity for the first time in his adult life. The invulnerability fades. Nolan walks forward, holding the rock. "Your compassion is a flaw," Nolan states. "It makes you weak. It makes the entire planet weak. My people will bring true order to this world." He grabs Clark by the cape and lifts him off the ground. He punches Clark in the face. For the first time in years, Clark bleeds. A cut opens on his cheek. Nolan hits him again, aiming to shatter the Kryptonian skull while the radiation suppresses his durability. Clark struggles to stay conscious. The pain is overwhelming. But he remembers Mark's face. He remembers Debbie's smile. He remembers his parents in Smallville. He refuses to give up. He focuses every remaining trace of solar energy into his eyes. Nolan raises his fist for a final strike. Clark fires a final beam of heat vision. He doesn't aim for Nolan. He aims for a lead pipe jutting from the mountain's old mining infrastructure. The intense heat melts the lead instantly. Clark redirects his splash over molten lead directly over Nolan's hand and the kryptonite shard. The lead cools and hardens around the rock. The green light vanishes. Clark's cells instantly resume absorbing the ambient sunlight. His strength returns. Nolan realizes his tactical advantage is gone. He attempts to punch through the lead casing to expose the rock again, but Clark is too fast. He grabs Nolan by the uniform and delivers an uppercut. The punch fractures Nolan's jawbone and sends him flying upward through the clouds. Clark follows, hitting Nolan with a sequence of blows that breaks his ribs. One final strike drives him down into a plateau in the Nevada desert. Nolan crashes into the sand, severely injured. He can't stand. His Viltrumite healing factor struggles to repair the internal trauma. Clark lands nearby. His suit is torn. He's covered in dirt and his own blood, but he stands. He looks at Nolan with a mixture of pity and resolve. "Earth isn't yours to conquer," Clark says, "and Mark isn't a weapon. He's a good kid." Nolan looks at the sky and understands what just happened. He failed the Empire completely. He can't defeat Superman in a fair fight. His kryptonite contingency is buried in a hardened lead case in the Nevada desert. Cecil and the Guardians will arrive within minutes to secure him. He uses his remaining strength to launch himself himself into space. He flees the solar system. He leaves Earth, just as he did in the original timeline, but the context is entirely different. He isn't leaving because he loves his son too much to kill him. He's leaving because he was beaten, and he knows it. Before clearing the solar system, he stops at a hidden Viltrumite relay station buried beneath the surface of Mars. He sends an encrypted transmission to the Empire. His full report, the complete tactical profile of the Kryptonian anomaly, every weakness a GDA file identified, and every detail he gathered across years of observation. Then he's gone. The truth about Omni-Man breaks publicly within 24 hours. Their greatest protector was an alien spy. The planet almost got handed to an interstellar empire without a single vote cast or a single missile fired. The panic is immediate and it's global. Clark goes on national TV. He doesn't hold a formal press conference. He stands outside the Daily Planet and speaks directly to the people. He doesn't hide the reality of the Viltrumite threat. He tells the world exactly what Omni-Man was. He tells them that Earth isn't defenseless. He smiles when he says it. Some people don't trust him. After all, Superman is exactly like Omni-Man. He's an alien that came from a different planet, here to allegedly protect Earth. What if Superman has different intentions? But most people believe him, not because he's powerful, because he shows up. After all, he's the one that stopped Nolan. Mark Grayson sits in his bedroom and stares at his invincible suit. He feels a deep shame about his father's actions. He wonders whether his Viltrumite blood makes him a monster destined to conquer, the way his father nearly did. Clark flies to the Grayson home. He knocks on the bedroom window. Mark lets him in. Clark sits on the edge of the bed. He doesn't wear his cape. He talks to Mark like a friend. My home world was called Krypton, Clark tells him. It was destroyed. But from what I've learned, my people made mistakes. They were arrogant. They thought they were superior to the universe. We don't get to choose where we come from, Mark, but we decide who we're going to be. Mark looks at his suit for a long time. Then he puts it back on. He doesn't try to be like his father. He tries to be like Superman. But the transmission Nolan sent is already moving through space at speeds no one on Earth can intercept. The Empire now has a complete dossier on the Kryptonian anomaly, his origins, his power ceiling, and every weakness their scientists and Cecil's combined resources identified, including the kryptonite supply that's now buried under hardened lead in a desert crater somewhere else. They'll know that too. What happens when they show up isn't a question of if, it's a question of how prepared Earth will be when they do. The transmission reaches Grand Regent Thrag. He analyzes the report. The Viltrumites maintain extensive archives on various alien species. They have historical records on Krypton, but they always considered it a dead race that destroyed itself through civil war. A living Kryptonian wasn't in any of their models. Thrag makes a calculation quickly. A being with this physiological profile, operating on a planet already resistant to standard assimilation protocol, represents a huge threat to Viltrumite expansion. Not just Earth, the entire galactic strategy. So he doesn't send another embedded operative. He doesn't give Earth more decades to fortify. He orders the mobilization of a specialized vanguard. He selects 3 of his most elite, ruthless warriors, Conquest, Anissa, and Lucan. He commands them to travel to Earth, execute the Kryptonian, secure Nolan's traitorous son, and take over the planet for future breeding. He gives them one tactical advantage. Nolan's dossier includes a full biochemical analysis of Kryptonian physiology. The kryptonite supply is compromised, but the Empire scientists can work with what they've been given. Conquest studies the file for the entire journey. He arrives knowing exactly how to beat Superman. A few months later, the GDA's deep space monitoring satellites detect 3 objects entering the solar system at faster than light speeds. The objects bypass the outer planets and enter Earth's atmosphere without slowing down. Conquest, Anissa, and Lucan hover above the ruins of an abandoned industrial sector in New York City. They don't issue demands. They don't ask for surrender. They initiate the attack immediately to draw out the Kryptonian. Conquest drives straight down and punches a massive crater into the concrete. Superman intercepts the strike team within seconds. Mark Grayson and the Guardians of the Globe arrive immediately after, dropping from a transport ship. Conquest looks at Superman. The old Viltrumite smiles. He spent an entire interstellar crossing reading the file on this man. He's ready. You're the anomaly, Conquest says. You look incredibly fragile for a dead race. Leave this planet, Clark replies. This is your only warning. We don't have to do this. Conquest laughs. The engagement is messy and destructive. Clark fights Conquest. The collision of their bodies creates shockwaves that shatter glass across the entire city. Clark realizes quickly that Conquest is older, more experienced, and far more ruthless than Nolan. And Conquest fights like he knows exactly where Clark's limits are. He targets the joints. He goes for the eyes. He aims for the throat. He knows all of Clark's weak points. Clark gets thrown into buildings. He bleeds from the nose. He uses his entire power set to compensate for the experience gap. When Conquest closes the distance, Clark unleashes freeze breath. The extreme cold hits Conquest's chest. It doesn't freeze him completely, but it causes thermal shock, slowing his movements just enough. Clark follows with heat vision directly to Conquest's face. The thermal energy burns through the Viltrumite skin. Clark finishes with an uppercut. Meanwhile, Mark and the Guardians engage Anissa and Lucan. The Guardians execute the exact strategies they built in the high-gravity training rooms. Red Rush moves at super speed, delivering hundreds of strikes to Lucan's face to disorient him. War Woman and the Immortal coordinate a double strike on Anissa. They try to hold their ground, using combined strength to match her Viltrumite power, though they take heavy damage doing it. Mark fights Lucan. He's younger and less experienced, but he he fights with focus, not rage. He remembers what Clark showed him. He manages to break Lucan's arm. Conquest recovers from the impact. He's furious. He drives back towards the battlefield, targeting the Guardians directly. He intends to kill them fast, break Superman's concentration, and create a window. Clark intercepts him mid-dive, tackling him out of the sky. He makes the decision. He grabs Conquest and flies straight up. They break through the exosphere and enter the vacuum of space. Conquest punches Clark repeatedly in the ribs, trying to break the grip. Clark doesn't speak. He delivers a sequence of blows without holding back, because there's nothing up here to protect. He shatters Conquest's jaw. He fractures his ribs. He delivers a final strike that breaks Conquest's collarbone and renders a Viltrumite unconscious. Conquest floats in the vacuum, incapacitated, unable to fight, unable to heal properly without oxygen. But Clark refuses to kill him. He grabs the unconscious Viltrumite and returns to Earth. Anissa and Lucan witness Conquest's defeat. They assess the battlefield. The Kryptonian is more powerful than the dossier accounted for, and the local defenders are more coordinated than any planet they've hit. They break off their engagements and abandon the mission, leaving Conquest behind. The Vanguard is defeated. The planet is secure. The casualties in this timeline are minimal because of the abandoned sector and the Guardians' coordination. Cecil Stedman secures Conquest underground. Earth isn't a soft target anymore. It isn't even a difficult target. It's a fortress, and the Viltrumite Empire now has to reckon with the possibility that if this continues, the anomaly might stop waiting for them to come to him. Mark Grayson sits on the edge of a ruined building and looks at his bruised hands. He survived a battle against elite Viltrumite warriors. He didn't kill anyone. He disabled them. He fought with everything he had and didn't compromise a single thing that his father tried to train out of him. Clark floats down and lands next to him. "You did good today, Mark," Clark says. "We survived," Mark replies, "but they'll come back. The Empire won't stop." "I know," Clark says. "And when they do, we'll be here. We'll stand together, not just as soldiers, but as protectors. We'll show them that compassion isn't a weakness. It's the exact reason we win." Mark looks at the city below. Emergency crews work through the rubble. Civilians help each other in the streets. The Guardians coordinate rescue efforts alongside Robot and Monster Girl. In the OG timeline, Mark spends years fighting brutal wars. He loses friends. He compromises his morals out of necessity. But in this timeline, he has a beacon to follow. He doesn't have to figure out how to be a hero alone. Mark stands up. He smiles.